Hello, this is Chris Cohen with another chess endgame lesson, and today we're going to look at something called the square of the pawn in king and pawn endings. The square of the pawn is formed by drawing an imaginary line between the pawn and the queening square and constructing a square with lines of equal length. This is the square of the pawn. If black's king can stay inside the square of the pawn, if it can move into the square of the pawn and stay there, then black can stop the pawn from queening. If black can't reach the square of the pawn, then white will queen his pawn and go on to win. Here with black to move, black can move inside the square of the pawn. White advances his pawn forward, and the square of the pawn looks like this. Black will continue to move his king inside the square of the pawn. Moving into the square of the pawn, white continues to move his pawn forward, and black will reach the pawn in time to stop the pawn from reaching the queening square where black can capture it. In other words, the pawn here, it does reach the queening square, but then black captures the queen, and the result is a draw. Let's take a look at the same position, but with white to move. Once again, the square of the pawn looks like this. And if it were black's move, then black could move inside the square of the pawn. White to move, and black's king is going to be just one square too far away to stop the pawn. And white will queen his pawn and go on to win the queen and pawn ending. Let's take a look at our first position with black to move again. Once again, we see the square of the pawn. And with black to move, black only needs to move within the square of the pawn. He doesn't only need to move along the back rank. As long as he moves inside the square of the pawn, he'll stop the pawn. So for example, here black can move to this square. And here black can move to any of these three squares as long as they're within the square of the pawn. For example, he could move here. And once again, as long as black moves inside the square of the pawn, he can stop the pawn. He can even move here. To either of these squares. And black arrives in time to capture the pawn after it queens. Let's go back and look at our first position with a slight difference, where the pawn is on white's second rank. Now here, white can move the pawn either one or two squares. So here, the square of the pawn actually looks like this. Black can move into the square of the pawn. White moves his pawn two squares. And we see that black can again move into the square of the pawn. This is the one exception because of the rule that allows white to move two ranks forward with his pawn on his first move. And once again, repeat the same pattern, and black stops the pawn from queening. This concludes this lesson on the king and pawn endings with the square of the pawn.